The night was unnervingly silent when Detective Harris stepped out of his car and into the damp air of Liberty Township. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the scent of wet earth and pine still lingered, thick and heavy. The red and blue strobes of police lights painted the trees in flashes of color, turning the quiet cul-de-sac into a surreal nightmare. Beyond the line of yellow tape, a small patch of grass had been cordoned off, and within it lay the body of a young woman, Ellie Weik. Her lifeless form was half-shrouded by a torn blanket, her hair soaked with rain, her skin pale and ghostly against the dark mud. The air was cold enough to bite, but Harris could feel the heat rising in his chest, a mix of anger and sorrow. The same cocktail he felt every time he saw a life brutally stolen. He crouched beside the forensic officer, who was snapping photos of the scene. The flash illuminated Ellie's face, and for a split second, Harris saw the faint trace of fear frozen in her expression, eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted. As if her final breath had been stolen mid-scream. There were bruises on her arms, defensive wounds, marks of a desperate struggle. Her fingernails were broken, packed with dirt. She had fought, that much was clear. A pool of dried blood stained the earth beneath her head, the edges already darkening. A single earring glittered nearby, half buried in the mud. Time of death looks around 11:30 p.m., said the medical examiner, voice calm but cold. She's been dead for about 3 hours. Harris nodded slowly, eyes scanning the surroundings, tire tracks on the gravel, footprints near the fence, and something else, a cell phone, shattered, lying just a few feet away. He picked it up carefully, examining the cracked screen. The lock screen still displayed the time, 11:28 p.m. 2 minutes. He turned to Officer Lynn, who was taking notes. "Get me her last call log," he said. "And find out who she was with before this happened." Lynn nodded and moved quickly. The rain began again, soft at first, then steady, drumming against the hoods and cars, washing away traces of blood from the ground. Harris stood up, staring at the body, his jaw tightening. Whoever did this, he muttered under his breath, didn't just want her dead, they wanted her to suffer. Around him, the night pressed close, thick with secrets. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was still awake, someone who knew exactly how and why Ellie Weik had died. The following morning, the forensic lab was already humming when Detective Harris walked in, coffee in hand, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night. The image of Ellie Weik's lifeless body refused to leave his mind, that haunting stare. The silence that followed the rain, the eerie calm of a neighborhood that had no answers. On the evidence table lay the first batch of collected items, Ellie's broken phone, a silver earring, soil samples, and photographs of the scene. Across from him, Officer Lynn was going through digital data on her laptop, her fingers moving quickly across the keys. Her phone logs show a call made at 11:26 p.m., Lynn said, glancing up. It lasted only 17 seconds, outgoing call to a number registered under a man named Michael Strauss. Harris froze. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Michael Strauss, Ellie's ex-boyfriend. They'd dated for nearly 2 years before things fell apart in a storm of jealousy and accusations. There had been restraining orders filed, complaints of stalking, and reports of Michael showing up at her house late at night. Harris leaned forward, his jaw tightening. "Get his address. Bring him in." Lynn nodded and started the paperwork. Harris picked up the evidence bag containing the earring, a small,
We'll check her
elegant
apartment
stud
next.
shaped like a teardrop. Only one had been found at the scene, but Ellie had been known to wear the pair daily. "Did we find the other one?" he asked. "Not yet," replied Lynn. "We'll check her apartment
Not yet.
next." By noon, the detectives were standing outside Ellie's building, a small, 2-story complex on the quiet side of town. The sky was overcast, heavy with clouds, and the wind carried a chill that made the moment feel even colder. The landlord, an elderly man with trembling hands, opened the door for them.
Ellie
"She was a
such
nice
sweet girl,"
he said softly. Kept
Ellie
to
was
herself,
always so bright.
always smiled. I
To think
can't
someone could
believe
just
his
take her
voice
like
broke,
that, it
and
breaks
he
my
looked
heart.
away. Inside, the apartment was neat, almost too neat, as if Ellie had been trying to hold her life together in perfect order. On the coffee table sat a half-empty cup of tea, now cold, and a small notebook filled with handwriting, dates, times, and brief notes. 11 o'clock, meeting at the park. Michael called again. Don't answer next time. Harris flipped through the pages slowly, his instincts stirring. The last entry read simply, If something happens to me, it's him." The words sent a chill down his spine. He looked at Lynn. "We need Michael now." An hour later, they had him in the interrogation room. Michael Strauss sat slouched in the metal chair, his eyes red but defiant. He was in his late 20s, tall, with messy blonde hair and a look that hovered somewhere between grief and guilt. "I didn't kill her," he said the moment Harris entered. "You think I'd do that to Ellie?" Harris didn't answer immediately. He placed a photo of Ellie on the table, the one from the crime scene. "You tell me," he said evenly. Michael's gaze flickered, then dropped. "We talked that night," he admitted. "She called me. Said she wanted to meet, to talk things out. But I never saw her. I swear." Harris folded his arms. You expect me to believe that?
You've been stalking her for
months.
You've
been stalking her for months.
Yeah,
she filed 3 police reports against you. Michael leaned forward, his voice trembling.
I
loved her. Yeah,
I made
mistakes,
but I didn't kill her.
I went to her house around 10, but she wasn't there. So I left. Lynn entered the room just then,
went to her house around
sliding
10,
a report toward Harris.
but she wasn't there.
"We found his fingerprints on her
left.
car door," she said quietly. Michael's eyes widened.
Of course you did!
"Of course you did. I helped her
I helped her
fix
it last week.
His voice cracked, panic creeping in.
Of
Harris
course you
studied him
did.
silently,
I helped her fix
trying
it
to
last
read
week.
the truth behind the words. There was fear there, yes, but was it fear of being caught or fear of being blamed? As the interrogation continued, a technician
10.
entered with a small sealed
Just like the
envelope,
boots we
the
found in your
results
closet.
from the lab. Harris opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph of a boot print found near Ellie's body. Size 10, the note read, "Distinct tread pattern, Nike Air Monarch." Harris glanced down at Michael's
You still want to
shoes.
tell me you weren't
The
there?
same pattern. The room fell silent. "You still want to tell me you weren't there?" Harris asked
You still want to tell me
quietly.
you weren't there?
Michael's breathing quickened. I don't know how,
Someone's
he
setting me
stammered.
up.
Someone's setting me up.
Who would want to set you
Harris
up?
leaned
Because
closer.
right now,
Then
everything
you better
points
start
to you.
telling me
I don't
who
know
would
how
want to set you
someone's
up.
setting me up.
Because right now,
Then you better start
everything
telling me
points
who would
to
want
you.
to set you up.
Michael
don't
lowered his
understand.
head, his voice barely a
There was
whisper.
someone else there that
You don't
night.
understand. There was someone else there that night. Harris's eyes narrowed. Who? Michael
understand.
hesitated, sweat
There was someone
dripping
else
down
there
his
that night.
temple. "A car followed me when I left her place," he said finally. "Black SUV. I thought it was nothing, but maybe," he stopped, his voice faltering. "Maybe it wasn't just me she was afraid of."
Zoom in right
Detective
here,
Harris
1114.
didn't waste a
That's the
second
SUV.
after Michael's
It's turning
words.
into the woods.
"Pull traffic cam footage from the area between 10 and midnight," he ordered as soon as he stepped out of the interrogation room. The tech team was already working. Within an hour, screens flickered with grainy video feeds from Liberty Township's main roads. Rain distorted many of the recordings, headlights blurring into streaks of white, but persistence paid off. On the footage taken near Birchwood Park, barely 2 blocks from where Ellie's body had been found, a black SUV appeared at exactly 11:14 p.m. It slowed near the entrance, paused for nearly a minute, then disappeared down a side road leading toward the woods. "There," Harris pointed, eyes narrowing.
Run
Zoom
all
in.
registered
The
Tahoes
frame
within a 5-mile
enhanced
radius.
slightly, enough to reveal
Copy
the
that,
make,
detective.
a black 2014 Chevy Tahoe, but the license plate was unreadable due to the rain. Harris clenched his jaw. "Run all registered Tahoes within a 5-mile radius," he told Lynn. "Let's see who thinks they can hide from us." As they dug deeper, more pieces began to surface. A witness, a night jogger, reported seeing headlights near the wooded trail around the same time. "It looked like 2 cars," the man said when questioned. "One was smaller, maybe a sedan, and the other, yeah, definitely an SUV. I remember because the bigger one's lights were off for a while. Creepy, like someone didn't want to be seen." That detail made Harris's pulse quicken. Ellie's car had been a white sedan. If she'd met someone there, and a second vehicle arrived soon after, that meant the killer could have followed her intentionally. Lynn returned with
Here
the
are the
results
registered
an hour
Tahoes.
later.
Take a look
"We've
at
got
Daniel
17
Carter, the
registered
security
black
contractor."
Tahoes in the
I
area,"
remember him from
she
the phone
said,
logs.
dropping a printout on the table. Harris scanned the names quickly: realtors, small business owners, families, until one name made him stop: Daniel Carter. Daniel Carter was a private security contractor who had once worked part-time at the same fitness club where Ellie trained. He was older, in his mid-30s, quiet but observant and, according to Ellie's phone records, He'd texted her 3 times in the week before her death. The messages were short. "We need to talk. You shouldn't ignore this. Please meet me tonight." Harris felt the chill return.
You were in
Find
contact
out
with
where
her
he was
before she
last
died.
night.
3
Within
messages
2
in 1
hours,
week. Why?
they had Carter
She
in
asked
an
for my
interview
help.
room.
I
He
told her
looked
to call the
calm,
police.
too calm, a man with a military posture, broad shoulders, and a face that revealed little. "You know why you're here?" Harris asked. "Of course," Carter said, voice steady. "It's about Ellie. You were in contact with her before she died," Harris continued. 3 messages in 1 week. "Why?" Carter sighed, looking down. "She asked for my help," he said. "She thought someone was following her. I told her to call the police, but she didn't trust that it would stop." "And where were you last night?" Harris pressed. "At home," Carter said simply. "Watching TV. Alone." Harris raised an eyebrow. "Convenient."
Looks
Lynn
like it, but I
stepped
wasn't
in,
there.
placing a
your
photograph
SUV?
on the
Did your brother
table,
borrow
a still frame
I
from
admit
the
I cared
traffic
about
camera.
Ellie.
"That your
She was afraid of the
SUV?"
notes and warnings.
Carter leaned forward, squinting. "Looks like it," he admitted, "but I wasn't there." "You expect us to believe someone else took your car?" Harris challenged. Carter hesitated. "My younger brother has a spare key. He's borrowed it before." Harris noted the hesitation. "We'll need to talk to him." Carter nodded slowly, his composure finally cracking. "Look, I cared about Ellie," he said. "She was scared, said someone was sending her notes, leaving things outside her door. That's why I messaged her. She didn't say who it was." Harris leaned back, thinking fast. 2 men tied to Ellie, both claiming they tried to protect her, both near the scene, both with motives tangled in obsession and secrecy. "We'll verify your alibi," he said coldly. "If you're lying, I'll know." Carter didn't reply, only stared at the table, jaw tight. Later that night, Harris and Lynn drove to Ellie's apartment one last time to recheck the scene for anything they might have missed. Inside, the air still smelled faintly of lavender and candle wax, a haunting contrast to the storm outside. Lynn moved toward the window and stopped. "Detective," she called. On the sill lay something small and metallic, a piece of torn metal shaped like a clip. Harris examined it under his flashlight. It was a fragment of a keychain, one branded with the Chevy logo. "Looks like someone dropped this during the visit," Harris murmured. The rain beat harder against the glass, lightning flashing in the distance. "If this belongs to Carter," he said quietly, "we've got him." But just as they were leaving, Harris's phone
So
buzzed.
there's a third man.
It was a text from the forensic lab. "You need to see this.
They're all afraid of.
DNA on Ellie's fingernails, not Strauss, not Carter. Unknown male, no match in database." Harris froze in the doorway, the thunder rolling across the sky. "So there's a third man," Lynn said softly. "Someone none of them mentioned." Harris pocketed his phone and looked back into the dim apartment, the shadows stretching long across the walls. "No," he said, voice low. "Someone they're all afraid of." Back at the precinct, Lynn spread a city map
Take a
across
look at
the
this
evidence
photo.
board, marking
Yeah, she
Ellie's
was in here
apartment,
last week.
the park,
Had a busted
and the
taillight.
area where the black SUV was spotted. "There are 3 major auto shops in this radius," she said. 2 are closed at night, but one, Wilson's Auto Garage, stays open 24 hours. Harris nodded. "Let's start there." When they arrived, the garage smelled of oil, metal, and cigarette smoke. A tall, wiry man in greasy overalls stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. "You folks lost?" he asked, eyeing their badges. "Detective Harris," he said, flashing his ID. "We're investigating the murder of a young woman named Ellie Weik. You recognize her?" The man frowned, glancing at the photo Harris held out. "Yeah," he said slowly. "She came here a few weeks ago. Had a busted taillight. Real sweet girl. You fix it yourself?" Harris asked. "No," the man said, shaking his head. "My night guy did. Travis Miller. Works late shifts, mostly keeps to himself." "Where can we find him?" Harris asked. "He should be in around 8 tonight."
I
By
didn't kill her, I
8:15,
swear.
Travis
But I know who
Miller was
might have.
sitting in the same
found your
interrogation
DNA
room
under her
where Michael
fingernails.
Strauss had been hours before.
Fought back
He
hard.
looked younger, mid-20s, with nervous eyes and grease-stained fingernails, the kind that matched the forensic description perfectly. "I heard about what happened," Travis said quietly. "It's awful. She didn't deserve that. Harris studied him. You worked on her car? Yeah, Travis nodded. A quick fix. She came alone. Paid cash. Did you know her outside of work? No, sir. Just a customer. Harris's gaze didn't move. You sure about that? Because your DNA was under her fingernails. Travis froze. The blood drained from his face. That's impossible, he whispered. Harris leaned forward. You want to explain how your DNA got there, then? Travis swallowed hard, his voice trembling. I don't know. Maybe from the car. Maybe she touched something after I worked on it. Lynn cut in sharply. She fought her attacker, Travis. She scratched him. Hard. Silence filled the room. Travis's hands shook slightly as he tried to steady them on the table. I didn't kill her, he said. I swear. But I know who might have. Both detectives exchanged a look.
Showing up at her job.
Talk, Harris said firmly.
Rick Holloway.
Travis hesitated, eyes darting to the camera in the corner. It wasn't just me who knew her, he said. She came here one night crying. Said her ex wouldn't leave her alone, and some guy, a friend of his, kept showing up at her job, watching her. Said his name was Rick. Harris's expression darkened. Rick who? Rick Holloway, Travis replied. He used to hang around with Michael Strauss. They used to come here sometimes, get their cars tuned. His bad news. Got fired from 3 garages for fighting with customers. Last I heard, he's doing side jobs out near the highway. Harris rose instantly. Get me his file, he said to Lynn. Within minutes, they had Holloway's record, multiple assault charges, drug possession, and a reputation for violence. His last known address was an old trailer behind an abandoned gas station on Route 9. The drive there was long and tense, the kind of quiet that carried a storm inside it. As they pulled into the lot, the place looked deserted, overgrown weeds, rusted signs, shattered glass glinting in the afternoon light. Harris stepped out, hand resting on his holster. The trailer's door was half open. Police, he called out, pushing it open slowly. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and gasoline. Tools and car parts were scattered across the floor. Lynn picked up a wrench smeared with something dark. Sir, she said quietly, holding it to the light. Blood. Fresh enough that it hadn't dried completely. Harris's pulse spiked. On the counter nearby sat a phone, cracked, the wallpaper showing Ellie Weik's face, smiling. He knew her, Harris said grimly. He more than knew her. Just then, a noise came from behind the trailer, the sound of gravel crunching under heavy boots. Harris motioned for silence and stepped outside, his gun drawn. A shadow moved between the cars. Stop, he shouted. The figure bolted. Harris gave chase, sprinting through the overgrown lot, the wind slicing through the silence. The man stumbled, turned, and for a split second, Harris saw his face, unshaven, wild-eyed, smeared with oil and blood. Rick Holloway. Before Harris could reach him, the man jumped into an old pickup truck and roared off down the road, tires spitting gravel. Harris fired one shot at the tires, but the truck swerved out of sight. He stood there, breath ragged, the echo of the engine fading into the distance. He's running, Lynn said, catching up beside him. Harris lowered his weapon slowly. No, he said, eyes narrowing. He's hiding, and he's going to lead us to the truth. The manhunt for Rick Holloway
Route 9
began
traffic
before
cam, that's
dawn.
Holloway's truck.
Every patrol
east.
unit in
Alert the
Liberty
checkpoints.
Township
Prioritize
had his
the bridge.
photo, a
On it.
mugshot from an assault charge 3 years earlier, showing a face hardened by violence and sleepless nights. The local news had already caught wind of the chase, flashing his image under bold captions, "Murder suspect on the run." Detective Harris stood at the operations board, red strings and photographs spread across the map like a web of lies and tragedy. He won't get far, Lynn said, scanning the highways on her tablet. His truck was caught by a traffic cam leaving Route 9, heading west. Harris nodded grimly. That road ends near Lake Odin. Nothing out there but woods and an old quarry. If he's hiding, it's there. He looked at the photos pinned on the board, Ellie smiling at a friend's party, Michael Strauss looking broken in the interrogation room, Daniel Carter's cold, unreadable face, and then the mugshot of Holloway. Somehow, all of them were bound by a thread that led straight to Ellie's final night.
He's
By
bleeding.
midday, the search had expanded into the
We're close.
surrounding counties. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping through the mist that rose from the woods. Officers moved in formation, combing through brush and ravines, calling out into the fog. The silence that answered was unsettling. Harris and Lynn moved deeper into the forest, boots crunching through wet leaves. "He's not stupid," Harris murmured. "If he's ex-military or worked mechanics, he'll know how to cover tracks." Lynn stopped suddenly, pointing at the ground. "Sir, look." Half buried in mud was a torn scrap of denim, streaked with what looked like oil and dried blood. "He's bleeding," Harris said quietly. "We're close." They followed the trail until it led to a small clearing near the quarry. A rusted truck sat abandoned near the edge, its engine still warm. Inside the cab were signs of panic: a crushed beer can, a blooded rag, and a photograph folded into a square. Harris picked it up carefully. It was of Ellie and Michael, arms around each other, taken years ago. But in the background, half hidden behind a group of friends, stood Rick Holloway, smiling faintly, eyes fixed on Ellie. "He knew them back then," Lynn whispered. Harris stared at the image, realization dawning. "He wasn't some random stalker," he said. "He was part of their circle." Back at headquarters, the records confirmed it. Rick had worked part-time at the same gym as Daniel Carter and often hung out with Michael Strauss's group. 3 men, all linked to Ellie. But while Michael's obsession had been emotional and desperate, Rick's had turned predatory. In old messages recovered from Ellie's laptop, there were references to a friend of Michael's who had begun following her home after their breakup. "I think he's worse than Michael," she'd written to a coworker. "There's something in his eyes that feels wrong." Harris's chest tightened as he read it. "She tried to warn us," he said quietly. "She knew."
They're
By
coming.
evening,
I have to move.
an officer reported movement near the quarry ridge, a faint campfire
under
spotted
arrest.
between the trees. Harris and Lynn were the first to respond, approaching silently through the brush. The glow of the fire flickered against the rocks, and near it sat Holloway, hunched over, talking to himself in a low rasp. He looked thinner than before, blood caked on his forearm, eyes wild from exhaustion. Harris motioned to Lynn to circle around. The crunch of leaves must have betrayed them, because Holloway suddenly looked up and bolted again. "Police! Stop!" Harris shouted, breaking into a sprint. The chase tore through the forest, branches whipping at his face, the scent of smoke and sweat thick in the air. Holloway stumbled once, twice, before Harris tackled him to the ground. They rolled through the dirt, fists flying, until Lynn arrived and restrained him. "You're done, Rick," she shouted, snapping the cuffs tight around his wrists. Holloway only laughed, a deep, broken sound that sent a chill down both their spines. Silence
Carter
fell
keeps
over
the illegal
room.
weapons at Riverside
Harris
Storage.
exchanged a sharp glance with Lynn.
Ellie was
"Carter,"
going to the
he
police
repeated.
about it.
He said he cared about her. Holloway let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, he cared, all right. But not the way you think. He used her, and when she found out, he couldn't let her talk." Harris's voice hardened. "Talk about what?" Holloway leaned forward, eyes burning. "Carter runs a side business. Private security, sure, but that's a front. He's been moving stolen weapons, selling them off the books. Ellie found out. She was going to go to the police." Harris's pulse quickened. "You expect me to believe that?" "Check his storage unit," Holloway said, smirking through the pain. "Unit 42 at Riverside Storage. You'll find everything there." Harris stared at him for a long moment. Holloway's words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. If he was lying, it was a desperate bluff. But if he wasn't, then Ellie Weik's murder wasn't a crime of passion. It was an execution. The night had settled deep and heavy over Liberty Township by the time Detective Harris and Officer Lynn arrived at Riverside Storage, a sprawling compound of steel doors and fluorescent lights flickering under a blanket of fog. Unit 42 sat at the far end, padlocked and silent, its corrugated metal door streaked with rust. Harris stared at it for a long moment, the echo of Holloway's words still looping in his mind. "You'll find everything there." If the man was lying, this would be nothing but wasted time. But if he was telling the truth, then Daniel Carter wasn't just a grieving friend, he was the puppet master behind Ellie Weik's death. "You ready?" Harris asked. Lynn nodded, flashlight in hand. The bolt cutters sliced through the padlock with a sharp metallic crack that seemed to echo for miles. Harris lifted the door, and the smell of oil, dust, and something faintly chemical spilled out like a secret escaping confinement. Inside, the unit was meticulously organized, metal shelves stacked with boxes, equipment, and unmarked crates. It looked more like a military depot than a storage space. Lynn shone her light across one of the open boxes and froze. Inside were firearms, each wrapped in cloth, serial numbers filed off, magazines taped together with precision. "Jesus," she whispered. Harris exhaled slowly. Holloway wasn't lying. He reached for one of the crates and pried it open. Inside were stacks of documents, invoices, shipping manifests, and coded ledgers listing weapons, delivery dates, and names. One name appeared more than once: Carter Security Solutions. Harris's chest tightened. It was all there, proof that Daniel Carter had been running an illegal arms ring under the guise of his private security business. But as Harris turned the pages, one line caught his eye: a transfer record dated just 3 days before Ellie's death. The shipment destination: Weik, personal pickup. He stared at it, disbelief flickering across his face. "She was supposed to receive this," he murmured. "Or maybe she stumbled upon it." Lynn's expression darkened. He must have used her name to cover the deal. She found out, confronted him, and he silenced her. Harris pulled out his phone and dialed dispatch. "I need a warrant for Daniel Carter's residence immediately," he said, his tone clipped. "We've got illegal arms and motive for murder." The operator confirmed, and within minutes, backup units were mobilizing. Harris and Lynn closed off the unit and waited for forensics to arrive, the distant hum of traffic mixing with the weight of revelation. Lynn broke the silence first. "Sir," she said quietly, "if Holloway knew all this, why didn't he come forward sooner?" Harris stared into the fog. "Because he was part of it," he said flatly. "Carter used men like Holloway, desperate, violent types, to move his shipments. Ellie must have figured it out, maybe even confronted Carter about it. Holloway probably helped clean up afterward until the guilt got to him." Lynn frowned. "But if Carter was that careful, why leave his name all over the ledgers?" Harris's eyes narrowed. He didn't think anyone would ever look. Dead witnesses don't talk. By the time they reached Carter's house, it was nearly midnight. The property was dark, sitting on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall pines that swayed in the cold wind. As the team approached, the porch light flickered on motion sensor. Harris signaled the officers to move in quietly. They breached the front door in one swift motion, weapons raised. "Police. Search warrant." The silence that followed was unsettling. The house was immaculate, almost sterile: leather furniture, framed certificates, polished floors. But it was the basement that held the truth. Downstairs, under dim lighting, rows of computers lined the walls, screens filled with encrypted files and surveillance footage. Harris clicked one of the monitors to play. The footage was from a dash cam, time-stamped the night of Ellie's death. The video showed Carter's SUV parked near Birchwood Park. Then Ellie appeared, walking toward it, holding her phone. She leaned into the driver's window, speaking briefly, and then suddenly stepped back, shouting. Carter exited the car, trying to calm her, but she turned to leave. He grabbed her arm. The footage ended there, corrupted. "He met her that night," Lynn said softly. Harris's face was stone. "And she never made it home." They found more: a blood-stained jacket hidden in a storage bin, fibers matching those found at the crime scene. A set of keys, one of them with the same Chevy logo fragment recovered from Ellie's apartment. Every piece fit like a cruel puzzle snapping shut. "He planned everything," Harris said, his voice low. "But something went wrong." She fought back. As they bagged the evidence, Harris noticed a photograph pinned to the basement wall: Ellie, smiling beside Carter, taken at the gym months ago. The edges of the photo were burned, the center marred by a knife slash through her face. The air grew heavy with the stench of betrayal and rage. Lynn spoke barely above a whisper. He loved her, and hated her for knowing the truth. Just then, a voice crackled through the radio. "Detective Harris, this is dispatch," he advised. "Daniel Carter's vehicle just crossed state line heading south on Highway 52. Units in pursuit. Harris's pulse spiked. He's running, he said, grabbing his jacket. He knows we've found him. Lynn followed close behind as they raced out into the night, sirens wailing through the darkness. Rain began to fall again, steady and cold, as if the heavens themselves were washing the blood from Liberty Township streets. But Harris knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Somewhere ahead, Daniel Carter was driving fast, desperate, and dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. And the truth about Ellie Weik's death was about to explode into the open.